Hey friends, it's your pal Mike Shea from Sly Flourish, here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy GM Prep. In this weekly show, I go through steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master while preparing for my Sunday role-playing game. In this case, I am running the RPG Shadowdark, the Shadowdark RPG by Arcane Library, and I am using material from the Gloaming, which is from Curse Scroll 1, also by Arcane Library. This show, like all of the work of Sly Flourish, is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of awesome stuff: City of Arches sourcebook, Uncovered Secrets Volume 1 and 2, a dedicated Discord server, a monthly Patreon Q&A, a whole bunch of exclusive adventures, a whole bunch of digital tools to help you run your games, all kinds of stuff that you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. And you also get to help me put on shows like this. To the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you so much for your support. So last week, they have not yet made it out of the temple. They went into a temple. They've been going into a temple to rescue a bodyguard for a goblin village. And this is hitting, I think this hit the same problem that I was talking about before, which is when you have a game where the characters can die so easily, it's really hard to have any kind of cohesive connection between the characters and the story that's going on, even when it's relatively thin. And the idea is like two of the characters were goblins that came from the goblin city of Aklakalik, which we made up. And they were going to travel down into this old temple, ruined temple area down below, to rescue a troll bodyguard, a troll bouncer who makes sure that no unsorted types make their way into the goblin city, the goblin village. So, and two of the characters were on board with this because they were both goblins. So they went down there, they found Barbarog, the troll, they rescued Barbarog, and then in that fight, right when they were fighting Barbarog, both of the goblins were killed, and two new characters showed up. And now none of the characters are goblins, and none of them have a connection directly to Aklakalik. And they're like, well, we saved him, that's great, but why don't we also just like explore things down here? So this is I've now run into this a couple of times, and it's generally kind of hard to get players to not think through the eyes of their characters. So much so that they're like, well, why am I even here? And why would I group with these people? And why would I go on these adventures? And I get lots of responses of like, well, they're players, that's on the players to figure out and stuff like that. And I get it. But there's also there needs to be some kind of cohesive connection. And I had the same kind of issue. So the main plot driver for Shadowdark is you're going into dangerous places to go get treasure. And you're like, okay, that's cool. Like the treasure is the main motivation for the game. Treasure is what actually helps you level up. And that's the design. Except, man, the lethality is so much that like, how desperate would you have to be willing to go down into some of these dangerous dungeons to acquire treasure just so you could have like a good night of carousing up above, and you're so likely to get killed that I need some, I get that. I mean, I guess like I'm bringing my heroic RPG idea to it, that I really want the characters to have a motivation that isn't just monetary, not even because I think monetary motivations aren't like right or aren't fun, but because it just doesn't balance with the risk. Like the risk reward is too high, and you'd be better off waiting outside. This is almost like Ultima Online, back when Ultima Online first showed up. You're almost better waiting outside for adventurers to come out and then stab them and take their stuff, because they're going to be weakened from everything they got, and it's a lot less risky, right? You don't have to worry about your torchlight if you're just waiting outside the game. So there's any sort of logical reasoning kind of, in my opinion, sort of falls apart on the idea that like you're going to these super dangerous places to get treasure. There needs to be another motivation. I felt like that with Scarlet Citadel, where they went into Scarlet Citadel, they just got beat up by the first two dudes they found, like two monsters, and the two monsters are beating the crap out of the characters. And they're like, and the players were like, why would we ever go back? Right? Like, why would we ever want to go there again? And I had to come up with more motivation and more reasons that no, you really are important and you need to do this, and no one else is going to do it, and everything like that. Hey, my mom is here. Hi, Mom. So that's something that I'm having to consider. And my current trick for dealing with this is creating sort of a factions and quests list, which is that there are sort of major players. This is almost like, it's not quite like fronts because these are not always villains, but there are major factions that the characters can be tied to when they're created. So it's almost like having a mini session 0 so that they can say, who are we tied to? Are we tied to Mugdulblub? Probably not Mugdulblub. Like the Mugdulblub is a quest, but I don't think that's one of the ones the characters would be tied to. But you could be tied to Titania, who's saying, I need you to recover magic items that are out there because the world is about to be destroyed and we want to bring them back. And your goal is to acquire these items so you and your friends can go to the Feywild go to the realm of the fairies before the world is destroyed. Yeah, you could, I don't know about the Green Knights as a quest, but I don't know if it's one of the major factions. Wardenwood is a faction, Save the Village of Wardenwood, and it has its own sort of idea. I guess, kind of supporting the Green Knights could be another one. The Fallen Knights of St. Yidris would probably be a better faction. Maybe I'll have to work on this a little bit. But the idea of like, when you make a character, choose one of these 3 factions. And by choosing the factions, that generates the quests that you have, so that you still have this connection to the world around it. I think that is a way to abstract the quests from the characters so that if the characters die and new characters show up, they're still tied to the same quest that the players are interested in and rolling with. I think that's something that we want to work on, because I find it difficult to not have that. I find it tricky to run it when you have this constant like shifting of new characters and they have new motivations, and then like, why are we doing the things that we're doing? And they're even in the dungeon, like they're showing up in the dungeon and then they're not sure why they're there. Like, how'd they get there? So that's something that we want to figure out. But we are going to get started with our new session notes. So I'm going to generate a new session planning template. As always, I'm using Notion to do my campaign planning. You can find a link in the show notes for how to use Notion, and including a template that you can use to do prep of your own using Notion. Today is 14 January, the Gloaming. So who do we have for our characters? There are 2 characters, There are 2 characters who have lasted so far the entire campaign. And I think we're close. I think this is the 18th session. So we're pretty far. Like we've been playing for some time. And we have two characters that have lived this entire duration. And that's Sirwin, the elf priest seeker, who's an outcast who came to the Gloaming looking for a new community. And Morrigan, who is a major driver for some of the storylines that's been going on and almost got eaten by a gelatinous cube. I will say this, that even though I've had some deep story threads connected to characters, it has not held back my hand in putting those characters at big risk. They went into a treasure vault in the last game, saw 3 treasure chests, and said, I wonder which ones are real. And Morrigan went over and knocked on one, and as she knocked on it, a pseudopod grabbed her, pulled her into the jaws of this thing, immediately knocked her unconscious from the amount of damage that she took. And I said, and it's you can hear the crunching of bone and the tearing of flesh as it looks like it's snapping its jaws down to bite Morrigan in half if something is not done. This is a trick that I use in 5e. I think you can use it in any RPG, that if you're going to set up a situation where one of the characters is at deadly risk, let them know and let the other characters know that this is now a thing. This is a good thing to do when you want to move the character so that whatever strategy they were trying to walk in with, you want to shake it up. The way to shake it up is to say like, hey, your friend, Dorvin is down and the gnoll is cackling and holding his spear over Norvin's chest as he's getting ready to impale them. If you do not manage to save Dorvin by the time it is the gnoll's turn, Dorvin's going to be impaled and killed. And that essentially gives all of the characters a chance to do something, but they have to do something. They now know that risk is there. And you can use that in Shadowdark just as easily as you can use that in 5e or other RPGs, that, let them know the risk. I actually heard this with falling, that when somebody falls in like a D&D game or a 5e game or any game, I don't know if it's any game, but almost any, like any kind of D20 fantasy RPG, and they're falling, you can essentially have them sort of slow motion fall for one round. And until, like, if they start falling, they will not actually fall to their death until the end of their turn. And that way, every character who has a turn between them has a chance to try to rescue them. And they have an option to try to save themselves the turn that they're falling. I don't remember where I heard it. I think it was a YouTube video. It might have been Bob Worldbuilder. I think Bob Worldbuilder brought this up. And I love that idea. Like, it's a really, really cool idea. It's easy to bring in. It adds a lot of tension. It also adds an element to save people who are falling. And I think it can work really well. And you can do something similar with any sort of lethal situation. When somebody's dropped into a lethal situation, you can give them sort of a countdown timer, which is the number of turns that you have to kind of save them. So I did that with Morgan. Morgan was knocked unconscious halfway in. I don't know if the characters tried to pull her out. Somebody tried to pull her out and it didn't work. And I was like, all you're doing is helping to tear her in half. And they're like, oh, that's not good. And then somebody else like jammed their foot in the mouth of the mimic and then managed to get her out and then healed her and they saved her. But I was ready to have her bitten in half, even though she was like a major catalyst to some of the stories that were going on. My thought is like if she dies, her spirit is going to go into the witch knife along with that of her mother and her grandmother, so on, who have been holding the witch knife. And the witch knife is this like holy relic that other characters will pick up, i.e. the magic items are now the characters of the game. So that's Morgan. Dazder, but Morgan isn't playing today. Dazder is a human witch shaman who carries the remnant of Memnon, which is a skull, the skull of Memnon. And his background is Jay's third character. Vom is a halfling who I think is a rogue. I can't remember if Vom is a rogue or not. We have Skull, who is an orc knight of St. Yidrith, and Calum, an elf wizard. These are our two newest characters. And I think everybody is in. And so it was Skull and Calum who used to be two goblins and now are not goblins anymore. And I think Vom is carrying Prophecy, the magic sword. So that has been an interesting thing to deal with, getting the characters connected. And we have the Glorious Dead. Like we have lots of people who have been killed, like Mac, torn apart by marrow-wolves, Yaxbick, torn apart by marrow-wolves, Bug Juice, dragged through a fire trap while being rescued. That was my favorite one. Fatlos, killed by ooze folk under the town, became a cheerful zombie. Finnel died in an acidic sandpit. Daisy lost the will to live. Daisy was my saddest. That was the saddest death. Ari was killed by a gelatinous cube. Is Varro? Yeah, Varro is dead. Varro killed by Raridan Varro Slayer, the forest dragon, after talking smack. He's like, I was just singing. And that was the one whose internal organs were liquefied by chlorine gas. And Jim petrified and turned into a gray ooze by a trap. So it's been fun to keep a list of all the characters who died. So one thing is like we are 17, or about I think 18 sessions into this. And I haven't heard anybody who's really not like, yeah, I'm kind of ready to move on. You know, I'll have to ask. I mean, I've been getting people's like, hey, are you still happy? And they're still like, no, we really are enjoying it. So they are enjoying the game. And one of the big questions that I had and that other people have had, and I've talked to other people who have this, is can a game like this run in a campaign? Does it meaty enough for a longer campaign? And I've heard of people who are running longer campaigns in Shadowdark. And I've been running one for 18 sessions. And I think where somebody where it wouldn't have legs is in the general crunchiness of the characters, that a lot of times players, even, you know, not talking just like power gamer types, but just any kind of players, want to watch their characters grow in meaningful mechanical ways. And the ways that characters grow in Shadowdark is very thin. Like you get like a +1 bonus to attack and stuff like that. You don't get lots and lots of stuff. Now those plus bonuses really matter because of how swingy the game is. So the effectiveness of those small bonuses matter a lot. In the same way that a larger bonus would matter a lot in D&D. Like if you got a good, I mean, I guess it's not really a character progression, but it's sort of the same lines of like if you picked up a flame tongue longsword in 5e, you now get to do an extra 2d6 fire damage on your attacks. You'd be like, wow, this is really good. 2d6 fire damage is really good. Shadowdark is so swingy because the hit points are so low that if you gave a weapon that did 1d4 extra damage, that would be huge. Or even 1 extra damage or 2 extra damage. Like we have a weapon now, it's a +3 longsword called Prophecy. That +3 bonus is the equivalent of like 2d6 on an attack roll because the game is so much swingier and the hit points of the monsters are so much lower that extra 3 points really matters far more because all of the numbers, we talk about the flat math of 5e. 5e doesn't have flat math anything like Shadowdark has flat math. Shadowdark's flat math is very, very flat in all kinds of different ways. So our game started, let's see, bring up my map on the other side here. So the characters have been making their way out. They decided to explore some of the areas around them. They battled the Mimic. They made their way through, got back to the bridge, realized that there is no way across the bridge, that the bridge is collapsed. They're trying to get out. They're like, is there any other way out? And I'm like, I don't know of any other way out. They did a lot of like, hey, how deep is this thing? And dropping things down and listening and doing scientific studies to try to figure out how far. And they figured out it's about 150 feet down. And what they don't know is it's boiling mud down there. So even if they did make their way down to the boiling mud, it would be very, very bad. So, and other things, including big piles of indignant frogs made their way down to the boiling mud, and they were not happy either. Then they saw light shining from the other side and a bunch of folks, because I think I rolled a random encounter and it was sort of like bandits. You know, bandits are like shaking down the characters. I don't know if it was shaking down the characters. I added that they're shaking down the characters. So they said, hey, we'd love to help you out. We were down here exploring too. We want to help you. And they're like, okay. And it's like, why don't we throw you a rope? And so they threw a couple of ropes over and said, yeah, we'll hammer them down with pitons over here. At which point our character said, every time we've done ropes and pitons, someone's almost died. We think that using ropes and pitons is a direct catalyst of character death, not steep falls. It's the ropes and the pitons that are killing us. But they said, well, we'll do one more experiment and see if the ropes and pitons are what they're killing us. And so they hammered in the ropes and pitons and got them spanning. So they had 2 ropes and pitons going across the bridge. And they said, okay, now the characters will go hand over hand. And Morrigan, who's super light, said, I'll go first because I'm super light and I don't think it's a big risk. And she shuffles across and gets to the other side. They say, oh, okay, they can bring her over. And they're like, great. And then the next guy, I think was Sirwin. And Sirwin started making his way across. And they said, oh, wait, we would like to negotiate a deal. We think that you probably have valuable items. And Morrigan, we would like you to give us your valuable items, or else we're going to cut this rope with your friend Sirwin hanging halfway down the rope. And they were very nice about it, though. They were like, we just think that it's important for us to kind of negotiate a good understanding of what's going on. And while they're negotiating, the guy's shaking the rope with Sirwin on it just to prove that like they'll cut it through. So they're obviously a bunch of jerks. And they're negotiating this and figuring this out, and people on the other side are like trying to like, should I shoot him with a bow? If I shoot them, will he be able to cut the rope, or my friend Sirwin's going to fall? And it's a really suspenseful situation. And then a mummy, who was a random encounter that had disappeared a while ago, shows up behind the bandits and starts like ripping the bandits into pieces in the darkness. Like, like a mummy hand like grabs a guy and pulls him into the darkness. And then they're like, what's going on? And Morgan's like, there is a mummy back there who's killing your people. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Oh my God, there is. And so then they're fighting the mummies. And then the characters then jump over to the other rope. The guy lets go of the rope. Sirwin manages to leap over and grab the other rope. The characters are beginning to make their way over. They get over there and they're fighting a bunch of bandits. And then I can't remember if the mummy hit somebody, but somebody dropped. And when they dropped, the torch went out on the other side as well. And now it's in complete darkness with a mummy on the other side. Mummies are very powerful, by the way. And only like one character is on the other side. He's like, what's going on over there? So the strong start is the mummy. And this is a mummy priest of Kytheros. I like to give like interesting, fun, unique names. It's not just a mummy. It's the mummy priest of Kytheros. The mummy priest of Kytheros, the bandits, and they had a name. I have to remember what their name was. And our heroes battle on the broken bridge in the dark. So that's a good strong start. Then when they are done dealing with that situation, they have some choices. Some small choices. This is choices 1. And they can continue to explore the crypts or the shrine of Kytheros, which is full of dangers and potential treasures. They can leave and return to Aklaklik. Then they have their next set of choices, which is travel to and deal with Greaves Redthorn at the Redthorn camp, where he's trying to summon. So I think, secret-wise, Greaves Redthorn is trying to summon Almazan? No, Undaluk, the Marrow Fiend, at the Redthorn. So that is a secret. They know this already, but kind of reinforcing the secret helps. Another secret is that the sorcerer Haldren had, and they know this already, powerful pair of artifacts that he and Morgan's mother, whose name is, what's her name? Oh, I need NPCs. Gwendolyn. I knew it started with a G. Haldren had a powerful pair of artifacts that he and Gwendolyn wanted to use to defeat Mugdulblub. Boy, I'm making a lot of use of these internal links, but it's kind of handy because you don't really have to do an NPC section. If you're linking to your NPCs in your secrets and clues, you have your NPCs. Haldren was trapped at the Vile Well trying to recover the second artifact required to kill Mugdulblub by the Knights of St. Idris. So this is a secret I don't think has come out that one of the characters who is a former Knight of St. Idris might know. So that's kind of a cool connection. What else? So they already know that is seeking artifacts to try to get people to leave, or to offer. She's trying to rescue artifacts so that they won't be destroyed when the world is devoured by Almazats. I think a fun secret could be the entity of Almazats has appeared in the sky. And what does that look like? Like a set of massive jaws, ethereal jaws, surrounding an eclipsed moon. I think that's pretty cool. Marker. So that's one choice. Their other choice is to recover the artifacts sought by the Fae Queen, to book passage to the realm of the Fae. They could also return to, what's the name of the village? Wardenwood. Return to the village of Wardenwood to give them the cure to Mugdulblub's curse, which is the sentient ooze. I don't know if it's sentient, the friendly ooze, known as CRISPR. Travel to Haldren's Tower to try to find the sorcerer. But they could instead head to the Vile Well if they know this. So some big choices that they have for for various scenes. So other secrets, what are other things that they could learn? So is there other elements to Kytheros? And so I don't know if we said directly that Kytheros hoped to use Mugdulblub. I'm getting addicted to like using the links to create all new fantastic worlds. I can actually use the for funsies. Let's make some worlds. How about this is what GMing is all about. Being able to make anything you want, including entire worlds. And we're going to make some worlds right now using the Lazy DM's Companion. The Lazy DM's Companion is available at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links are available in the show notes. Also available on other fine places such as Amazon.com or I don't know that I would call Amazon a fine place. It's available on Amazon.com. It's also available on DriveThruRPG. An interesting note, I'll probably mention this other places. If you have trouble with the shipping and handling, because it's a small book, but if you live in a country that isn't North America or the UK, shipping can be really high. The print-on-demand versions on DriveThru and on Amazon should be significantly cheaper because they are printing locally and don't have to deal with VAT and stuff like that. So we make them available there. The quality's not going to be quite as good as the quality of the offset printed version that we have done. World generators. Where is the world generator? Alien Worlds. And I packed up my dice. I got to use my other set of dice here. All right. What is the sky? We're going to do 3 worlds, right? First one is a swirling violet clouds in a vortex. Some shattered landscapes. We see, I didn't see what that die roll was. That is an 18. Ancient ruins. Otherworldly landmarks. So that's a shattered landscape. Otherworldly landmarks are 2. I totally can't read these dice. I'm going to get some dice I can read. Otherworldly landmarks include floating obelisks. Otherworldly layers, I don't think we really need too much. Titanic corpse. And 15 and lost travelers. That's funny because that sounds like Marrow, right? That whole place sounds like the very place where worlds go to die. Let's roll like a few dice. Let's save a little time. So 11 and 6. So 11, twisting worms in a red haze. That sounds terrible. And 6 is huge crevasses. So we have huge below a sky of twisting worms. Otherworldly landmarks and layers include 10 and 16 is a huge orbital eye. And 16 is a floating dungeon below a sky of twisted worms. And it is for festering demons, filled with festering demons. It seems like Kytheros' worlds are not really nice places. The next one is 12, filled with huge nearby planets. And 5, massive mountains. That sounds cool. Landmarks include 7 and 20. 7 is twisting towers, and 20 is a howling mausoleum below a sky filled with huge planets. And encounters include 3 grasping oozes. I don't want to do oozes because we already have oozes. 19 A blinded priest. Like, we'll just go with priests. So those, why am I rolling up worlds? Those are some worlds that will be on the tapestries of the tomb of Kytheros when they go in there. These are examples of worlds that Kytheros sort of built using the power of Mugdulblub. You can tell they're not great. Like, those are not great worlds. So, and that would make sense that it turns out using Mugdulblub to create worlds is not so great. So that's kind of fun. What else? So Kytheros realized that using Mugdulblub to create new worlds didn't work out because the ooze-like entity would simply devour whatever it created, creating ever larger Mugdulblubs. So Kytheros sealed off those worlds, but Mugdulblub kept coming through and always would until it was destroyed everywhere. Though Mugdulblub exists in multiple separate forms, it's actually one single organism that exists everywhere. Now, everywhere within a world. Kill it in one world, and it dies there. Throughout that world. Kill it in all worlds. I think this is the key about using the Well of Worlds with the Sphere of Annihilation to destroy Mugdulblub in all worlds. Are there any other secret? Is there any secret? Well, so there's the whole secret. Saint Yidrith is a twisted celestial entity worshipped by the knights. Saint Yidrith is actually bound beneath their keep. And their keep is what? I forgot to bring up Curse Scroll 1. Or did I bring it up? I don't think I did. Marker. Whoops, that's not right. So their keep is where? Is that 1308? The Meyer Castle ruins. They're in 1406. Greywall Priory, which is not far from this. So that is like a temple, right? At the Greywall Priory. This is my map that I was going to use for the priory. I like it. Copy. Paste that right in there. Oh, there we go. Oh, that image is big. Oh, this is perfect. Sometimes I get a really good map and it's just perfect. Because that little cell down there in the lower right, that could be exactly where the creature is being held, the entity. So that's fun. What else do I need? I think I'm good on secrets. I got my 10, so let's not overdo that. Fantastic locations. I've got the Forgotten Temple of Shun, Aklaklik. Yeah, like I linked to basically every location here. This is kind of a useless enterprise. In fact, I'm going to just delete that because I don't really need it. And I think what we're going to do. So I did these like auto-populated notes where you could select an entity as being current or not. And I don't know how useful I find those. Monsters, I don't really need to worry about because they're in the book. But what do we have? We have bandits and a mummy. And beyond that, I have no idea. And that's cool. Same with treasure. So like a lot of times, because you're rolling randomly to determine a lot of the stuff that's going on, you don't need to do a lot of prep of like which monsters are going to come into play, except the ones you know are going to come into play. And NPCs, there's so little prep. And here's something interesting for those of us who are still also playing 5e games. Boy, I tell you, when I'm using Forge of Foes to do, it's not any harder than this. Like Forge of Foes took one element of 5e. I know I'm like pitching my own book and, but I'm using it and oh my God. So I run a Shadowed Keep on the Borderlands game and I ran it last night and I was in kind of a hurry. And so all I did for monsters was grab the Forge of Foes stats for the monsters here. And I ran this epic 3 or 4 wave battle against dozens of skeletons. Like, I think it was like more than a dozen skeletons, at least half a dozen zombies, ogre zombies, and cult fanatics. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with a bunch of different stat blocks. And I just used stats purely from Forge of Foes. And I don't think my players, I don't think my players minded at all. Like I had, the one interesting thing is I had one of the cult fanatics using a magic item that I dropped, this Twilight Dwarven Battle Axe, which is actually not called Nightshade. I forget what it's called. I gave it a different name. And I said, I'm going to have one of the cult fanatics using that axe. And that was the only thing and I bet it was, 5e, I don't think you need stats any more complicated than this. It's heresy, I know, but wow, it was so easy. So lazy. And, Shadowdark's kind of the same way. Shadowdark could just use the book. I could just, look it up. So what else do we need? I don't know that we need a whole lot, right? Like, I've got my secrets, I got my characters, I got scenes. Why don't we clean up those factions since we've got a little extra time? So I'm going to go to my factions and quests. And I'm going to keep this stuff. I'm just going to create a new thing up above. And we're going to have like character factions. And I'm going to start with, and the quest, save the gloaming from the destruction of, I'm going to say save the goblins, right? Save the goblin village from the destruction of Almazatz and Mugdulblub. So that's one faction. Another faction is Wardenwood. And save the people from Mugdulblub's curse. Save the people from Mugdulblub's curse and from the destruction of Almazat and Mugdulblub. Titania, recover the artifacts of the gloaming before it's destroyed. So those are some of them. What are there any other? So like Mugdulblub as a faction doesn't really make sense. And these are big quests, right? These are not like, those are like the big goals. And then there's quests that tie to them. And I think that's where these guys come in. I think we're going to do the Green Knights. The Green Knights, the Fallen Knights of St. Yidrith, save the world and stop the destruction, not the destruction of the Knights of St. Yidrith, the wrath of the Knights of St. Yidrith. So for those characters, like we have characters who are Knights of St. Yidrith. Well, instead of being a Knight of St. Yidrith, they're kind of a fallen Knight of St. Yidrith. That works better for me than being, because like the Knights of St. Yidrith are kind of a villainous faction. I think like those are good. Those are 4 good factions. I don't think we need more than that. I can't think of any other factions. And you want all of the factions to be generally aligned with one another. And I think in this case, they are. So, oops, my mouse is not working. Marker. So Aklaklek's quests are rescue Barbarog and either book passage for the goblins through Titania or stop the destruction of the gloaming. I think that that looks good. I don't know what the wolf cave is about. I don't know if we're going to do anything with the wolf cave. There we go. So the Save the Gloaming quests, like the things that they can do for that are close the gateways of Undaluk, the Marrow Fiend, at the Red Thorn Camp, rescue Haldoran, recover the Well of Worlds, and recover the Sphere of Annihilation, and then use the well in the sphere to destroy Mugdulblub. Could be fun. All right. I think that all works. I think we're good with all of this. And I think we will call it there. I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while I prepared for my Shadowdark game. If you enjoyed this show and you want more stuff like this, the best way to get it is to sign up for the free Sly Flourish newsletter. There is a link in the show notes to sign up, and you get a weekly RPG-related email sent directly to your inbox that includes links to all of the other work that I do all week. It's an excellent resource. You also get a free Adventure Generator PDF. Again, all of that is completely free. You can also sign up for the Sly Flourish Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of great stuff. Bunch of tools to help you run your game, dedicated Discord server, the monthly Patreon Q&A, City of Arches sourcebook, a whole bunch of other material. You get lots and lots and lots of stuff for not a lot of money on the Patreon. And you can pick up any of my books, including The Lazy DM's Companion, which you saw me use earlier, Forge of Foes, which I talked about, and all of my other books at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Thank you all so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.